All this was happening to Russian girls and women. What were harems in the era of Genghis Khan? Greetings! Today we will talk about the period of the invasion of the Mongol Tatars in Russia. And at the same time, we will analyze the features of harems Genghis Khan, where and got female representatives of the female sex. Is it true that the enemy very much appreciated the beauty of Russian girls and women and even paid attention to the shape of their hips? Genghis Khan had only 4 official wives, while the number of concubines was up to 7,000. True or false? For what misdemeanors girls could be punished, and quite severely, and why many concubines after a certain time did not want to return to their homeland. Be sure to watch the video to the very end so as not to miss all the key points. Constant raids on Russian territories. Many of you, of course, are well aware of what a threat to Russia was the Mongol Tatars. The enemy for several centuries made constant raids on Russian territories, and after capturing the lands imposed a tribute on all the inhabitants. Mongol Tatars crushed everything on their way and also devastated the whole cities and villages. Nevertheless, the enemy did not exterminate all in a row. So, during the reign of Genghis Khan, Mongol Tatar conquerors regularly took away from the captured territories of ordinary girls and women. This is due to the fact that the nomads at that time formed a matriarchy. Plus to everything directly, Genghis Khan possessed the whole harems, which contained concubines. And if we take into account the fact that the Mongol conquerors valued female beauty, it becomes clear why girls and women were taken to foreign territories. Yes, the Mongol Tatars paid attention to the Caucasoid appearance, slenderness, and even the shape of the hips. But the most important value is not in this. When the enemy took girls and women with him after raiding a foreign territory, it was a kind of status. The Mongol Tatars demonstrated the power of their army and made it clear that they were capable of much. In addition to all the above-mentioned representatives of the weaker sex in the following years, was suitable for reproduction of the population and maintenance of fighting capacity of enemy structures. Because the Mongol Tatars were losing their warriors in struggle with Russian people, it is quite natural that not every girl or woman wanted to get to the enemy, and certainly in a harem. Therefore, in the process of enemy raids, everyone tried to safely hide and wait out the next battle. But sometimes, out of desperation, the poor souls went out of life voluntarily. For this purpose, they drowned themselves in bodies of water or jumped from a great height. That's how our ancestors avoided shame and the fate to come. The hard way. As you can already guess, the captured girls and women traveled a specific distance to reach the borders of the Mongol Empire. And this is a very hard, grueling journey, especially when you consider how our ancestors were treated by the enemies themselves. But here it is necessary to make an important note. As we have already mentioned earlier, to the Slavic people, Mongol Tatars treated with dignity. True, to beautiful girls, but if the appearance of female representatives was not so ideal at all, they were equated with slaves. But the beauties immediately fell into the category of future concubines. To make you understand, concubines were treated better and given a lot of privileges, but more on that later. Unfortunately, slaves on Mongolian territory were deprived of all freedoms and human dignity. Even during the procession, they could easily be physically injured when they fell down from extreme fatigue. Meanwhile, concubines were delivered to Genghis Khan in special wagons. This was done only in order not to harm the women's appearance and beauty. Among the Mongolo-Tatars was also a common practice of distributing sacrifices to meet the needs of warriors. This was especially true of wounded enemies. When a man had only a short time to live, it was a high honor for him to enjoy a woman's charm. And also, girls could easily be left in the middle of deserts, plains, and empty territories. Alas, but such a victim was already unnecessary to anyone, so the chances of survival for her tended to zero. The arrangement of Genghis Khan's harem? Well, here we have come to the most important and interesting. Let's finally sort out the key features of the Mongolian harem. And in parallel with this, we will learn how living conditions were available to concubines of Genghis Khan. The first thing to pay attention to is a huge number of girls and women in harems. And here not only Russian, but also ladies of other nationalities. That is how Genghis Khan enriched himself at the expense of other people. By the way, for comparison, the Mongol Khan had only 4 official wives, whereas the total number of concubines reached the mark of 7,000 people. Eunuchs and guards served in each harem. They, by the nature of their work, protected concubines from outsiders and protected them from potential external threats. If you suddenly ask why such duties did not take on the ruler himself, the answer is quite simple. It is physically impossible. Just imagine the situation when harems are replenished time after time with more and more new concubines. Genghis Khan certainly could not keep track of all of them. That's why he hired the appropriate officials. And yes, Mongolian eunuchs and guards did not have the slightest right to come into contact with concubines. Plus, all sorts of love affairs of girls and women were forbidden. This is explained by the fact that only Genghis Khan could be alone with his concubines and no one else. Otherwise, the guilty could pay for it with their own lives. There is even a case when one of the girls was wrapped with ropes for disobedience, placed in a sack, and in a moment, this object was in the river. So, in harems, all the rules and recommendations coming from above were followed. Did you know that during the reign of Genghis Khan, the city sewage system was improved and the palaces were equipped with all conveniences? Concubines paid attention to such innovations when they found themselves on the territory of the Mongol Empire. What is there to say? Even contemporaries are amazed at how advanced the Mongol Tatars were in terms of technology. Whereas Western Europe, it must be admitted, was inferior to the standard of living in Mongolia. Along with concubines on the territory of the Mongol Empire, there were also slaves. We have already talked about it earlier. But it is more correct to say that they existed. Unlike concubines, these girls and women were in constant confinement. Naturally, they were at the very bottom of the Mongol-Tatar hierarchy. It is enough to give an example of the same food. Slave girls were often given meat not eaten by dogs. So if our ancestors could not escape their fate after the next invasion of the enemy, the best option was a harem. Huge privileges. It is logical to assume that since our ancestors were treated with dignity in harems, there were special privileges for them. Yes, this is indeed true. For many years of life in harems, girls and women were taught many things. Representatives of the female sex learned literacy, poetry, drawing, singing, dancing. In the end, they mastered horseback riding and archery. It can be said that it was in the harems that the full self-development and formation of personality took place. It is no wonder why after a certain period of time, many people did not want to return back to their homeland. They were getting used to Mongolian culture and customs. But some girls Genghis Khan could give to other rulers as a sign of special gratitude. Conclusion. Thus, harems in the era of Genghis Khan's reign played a key role in the life of the Mongol Tatars. They testified to the power and high status of the people. Beautiful Slavic women got into the harem and the living conditions were not so bad.